Hi YouTube, welcome back to Wtf Rc Cars. So this is one I'm looking very forward to building. It's the Ruddog IRIS ONE touring car. So let's get you in for a close-up look and see how interesting it is to build this one. Right, so here we go. First off, you're going to need bag one. You're also going to need some grease for the O-rings. And you're going to need the little parts tree that's got your gears on it, and we're going to need 2 of these tapered head screws or countersunk screws, 3x8mm, and 4 of the little 2.5x6mm, and they're all in the screw kit. So first off, we're going to take one of these screws, drop it down the middle of one of his output shafts. Then we're going to have to screw that into one of the sides of the pulley, so they go in quite easy. So that screws down quite tightly. Then you've got to get the outer guide ring, and you want the taper to the inside. So that should just clip on, and it does tell you to make sure you have the taper facing inwards. So that's got that into position. Then we're going to want the opposite side on. We should be able to screw this in. So that's got its first pulley built. Then we're going to move on to what looks like the diff. So it says we start off with one of these gears, and we're going to put that into position. Then we're going to want to get a little bit of grease on this O-ring. So we got that into position. Then we're going to drop it down into the diff. That does seem to fit pretty sturdy. So we're going to want the pin. Then there's output cup. This looks like it's going to be fiddly. Now that went in surprisingly easy. And then we've got to get this O-ring on. And you're just going to have to make sure you don't get this caught on any of the sharp edges, because it's going to want to cut the little O-ring. And once that's sat down, that's holding the output pin in. So we've got that all in position. Then we're going to work the opposite way on the next one. So we need that. We need a bit of grease on his O-ring. Then that's going to come through the back of that part. So next we're going to put the output cup on. Then we've got to get another little pin in. Then we've got to get his little O-ring on that retains it. And that should keep his little pin in place. Next, we're going to be assembling the spider gears. So you want all 4 of them in position, and then we're going to place the shims, one on the back of each of these. Once we've got that in position, we can drop that into as diff. Make sure it all works. Then we've got as gasket to drop in place. Now it says a good starting point is 7000 CST. So then we've got the lovely task of trying to fill up a diff, and this is a tiny diff. It says you need 10 grams, I believe it is. So let's see if we can get any of this diff silicon in. So once you've got your diff grease in, you then want to double check that your gasket's lined up over the screw holes, because we don't want to be tearing gaskets. Then we're going to drop the top gear in place, and these are tiny little screw heads. So I'm just going to get these started. And then we're going to want to tighten all 4 of these down. So I like to do it and just keep switching the order that you're tightening them. And then before it gets tightened all the way down, I just like to make sure the diff is functioning properly. And don't try and over tighten these. They are really fine thread. So that should be the diff built. Last thing we've got to do is close it off with the tapered side again facing inwards, and we should just be able to work this round. Then you should have quite a nice feeling differential and the pulley belt. So let's see what we need next. So looks like moving on to the front and rear pulleys. So with these, front one has a round hole. So let's see how it's telling us to put these on. So it looks like it's just asking you to sit it in that way. And then this again, these with the slightly tapered edge facing inwards. So you should just be able to work your way around popping these on. And we got one pulley built. And you do have the little inserts that line up, help you get it in position. And it does lock in quite solid, and again tapered edge to the inside, and you should just be able to work your way around, and these pop on. And again, the round one is for the front and the square one is for the rear. So let's move on. Right, so this bit looks fun. You're going to have to supply your own spur gear, but basically, to what I can work out, this is the way it goes. So we're looking for the front pulley, which is the one with the rounder hole in it. So it looks like this goes that way round, and then we've got what looks like the metal insert. Looks like we have a bearing on this side, and then we're going to want a bearing on the opposite side. Looks like that's the way it wants that built. So we have a bearing on the back that is 411.4, one in the front that is 483. Then we have the aluminium insert in the middle of it. It looks like it wants us to put that shim on and then slide that on. And then in the back, we're going to want a tiny bit of thread lock on this, but it looks like it's asking us to fit a 3x6. So we want a 3x6 button head screw into the back of this. Must admit, not the easiest of instructions to follow. I'm not sure if we're going to be able to get the belt down into that now. Nope. So you're going to want to get one of the belts around this pulley before you tighten it all the way down. And it looks like all three belts are the same. So hopefully they are. So then your next belt is going to go around that way, and then around this pulley as we put this together. So you're going to want another of the bigger bearings on the back of this, and this is the one with the square hole in it. So we're going to want that in place. Then we're going to want the belt over it. So that's at least two belts on. Then when we move to this side, the pinion needs to go on our spur gear, but it doesn't tell us which way round this goes. So there's not really any way of telling from instructions which way round your spur gear goes. So I guess we'll just have to try it. And we want that belt over there. Just drop that down. Then we're going to want a bearing on the inside of that. And then it's asking us to put another 3x6mm Well, the good news is it's all moving quite freely. Then we're going to want to take one of these tiny bearings, because this is going to make your tensioner for your belt. And this screw again is a 3x6. And it says the bearing on here should be a 3x6 by 2.5, but that certainly feels that if you nipped that head up, it'd lock that bearing in place. And then this sits through the back. Obviously you don't need thread lock on any of these bits because these are going into plastic. And this should make us belt tensioner. So basically, if it goes together right, and it's not telling us that these belts are different lengths, also doesn't tell us which way round as spur gear goes, but it does all seem to fit really smooth. So that's what you should end up with, and then you can adjust your belt tension as needed. But it does look quite a nice setup. So let's endeavour to carry on with the build. So now we're moving on to these bits, and it's turn us to assemble these with the smaller space to the top, so the eccentric hole facing upwards. You're then also going to need some tiny little grub screws, and I would advise thread locking these, because you don't want these little things escaping or coming loose. So these are just going to screw up and hold this into position. So basically that's how you want all four of these. Grub screw in either side, eccentric hole to top. So I'll crack on getting all four of these put together. Alright, so you should end up with four of these, all with the eccentric holes towards the top. So let's move on. Right, so looks like this is the layout it's telling us to fit it. With these spaces it's saying go for number 1 and have the one facing in towards the motor on front and rear. So let's get these assembled first. So it looks like you drop the insert in, and then the bearing goes inside. So we'll get one of them done for each side of that. Then we're going to want to mount our center diff. So once we've got that into position, we're then going to have to flip over our chassis, flip over the diff, which is going to be easier said than done. And basically we just need to line these up. You're going to want thread lock on all these little screws, and it's the center holes that we're going to line up first. So it would be easier to put these on first without the diff, but then it's a bit more difficult for me to show you on video how it's going together. So I'd get these started first, and then you're going to want a 2.5mm driver for the outer ones. It's always a lot easier building RCs if you're not trying to make a video at the same time as doing it. This is basically just to show you how it's going to go together. I'm going to have to drop the diff out and get the belt round. So now we can just nip all these up. Clean off any excess thread lock. But basically that's the position we're going to want the diff to sit in. Then the center drive, let's get this on. that's going to go on next. So when we flip this over, the positioning of the screws that it's asking us to fit on this one, and again got 3 screws, so we're just going to have to get a bit of thread lock on these. So the positions it's asking us to go for on this one is the rear screw. It's telling us to go for the furthest back. Then as next screw along, it's telling us to go for the first hole. And then the last one. This thread lock's good, but my god, it gets everywhere. So, should have the drive system coming along. Then we're going to want to get these two into position. So we can flip it over, and again the hooks on the back, they're facing backwards. So I'm going to use the smallest screws to hold it into position. But I'm not tightening them down all the way yet. And just remember these tiny little 1.5mm screws, don't go crazy tightening them up. The thread lock's going to do its job and hold them into position. The larger ones on the outside you find to use a bit more force tightening them up because they're a bit of a larger head. But lastly, should be able to assemble the front spool. And it doesn't tell you which way around to put these bearings, but I'm putting all the sort of black sides facing outwards. So if we get that around, should be able to drop this into position now. And we do have a relatively smooth feeling drivetrain. So that is basically what you should end up with. The tiny little screws in the centres, bigger screws on the outside, frontmost, rearmost, and the first one on the rear. That's what it's asking us to assemble. And it is a really nice, smooth feeling drivetrain. We've got these little hooks on the back facing rear on them both. So let's crack on. So we're now moving on to the top deck. So if we slide that one under there, that should line up. And then that one doesn't look like it's got any way round that makes any difference to it. So if we slide that one on there, then we have these two tiny little pieces. Let's have a look. So these are 2.5mm, and it's asking us to mount this in the furthest hole back. So I'll get that into position, and then again on this side, furthest hole back. And then we have 4 of the 6mm button head screws again. And I had to flick forward a page in manual because it doesn't make it clear which way round or where you're meant to screw these on the front, because you do have 2 sets of holes. But later on in manual it looks like they've gone for the innermost set, front and rear. So we'll get that on. And then get the 4 in the rear. And then we just need to tighten these 2, 4 up front and 4 on the back. Right, so that is the chassis and top deck fitted. It does feel really nice and smooth. There's no binding to what I can tell of yet. The rear diff feels quite nice. There's no stiff points. And we've got this little tensioner on there. Doesn't feel like there's much flex in chassis. So it does feel nice with this stock positions that they've told us to use. The chassis can flex slightly, but I think that's far enough for today. So let's wrap this one up. So there we have it. The chassis and top deck's built. There's a few parts that could do with a bit of work, should I say, in manual. This is the first sort of touring car that I built other than the Tamiya chassis. There's a few parts that feel a little cheap, like these pulleys. Are they just clipped together? But they do look adequately strong enough for the job. The manual was a little bit sort of difficult to tell which way around this spur gear goes. It doesn't really show you. But overall, seems pretty straightforward to build. I think this is probably the first belt drive system I've put together, so maybe these pulleys, maybe that's just the norm for touring cars. As I say, I've not built any of the others. The diff, the screws kind of felt like if you'd have even slightly tightened them up, they'd have sheared off. But the design of the diff looks like it's pushed together anyway. The little rubber O-rings are quite nice that hold the drive pins in on the rear diff. The adjustment on this tensioner seems like it's got enough movement. You can tighten it down quite far, so I don't think belt jumping on this centre belt's going to be an issue. You could tighten it all the way down to that. It's still not bowstring tight, but it's quite tight, so I don't think that's going to be an issue. I'm hoping I've got the right bearing on here, because it does measure correctly, but it doesn't feel that free, and I have loosened this screw off. But also the belt doesn't really run on it, it's just to put a bit of tension on it, so that's yet to be seen. But overall, quite an impressive build so far. Definitely going to have to watch for debris getting up into that bottom belt. But that said, I may just stick a cover over it. We'll have to see. But it does feel quite nice quality on all the parts. Everything's fitted. The tolerances so far have been absolutely perfect. The front and rear belts don't look like they jump. So I mean, after riding a few Harleys, quite used to belts and tension and never had a problem with an Harley belt. But thanks again for watching Wtf Rc Cars. If you like this kind of content or just my incessant ramblings, don't forget to like and subscribe, share to friends and family, and hit the notification bell so you can see how this rather nice looking touring car takes shape. I'll catch you guys again in the next one.